Your Pokémon theory is very interesting, Lockstin, but there are a few things you may have missed out. Hey there, and welcome back to Culture Bits, where last episode we looked at why the Triforce is a work of pure evil. Okay, maybe I over-exaggerated the evilness and connections to Zelda a little bit, but my analysis still stands. Last episode, I also mentioned that The Key of Solomon is a very interesting book, which holds even more secrets, which relate to an even bigger franchise of games. So if you haven't guessed what that franchise is by looking at the thumbnail or the video title, then it's Pokémon. I also recommend watching the last episode of Culture Bits as it explains a lot about the Key of Solomon, which you may find useful for understanding what I'm talking about. This video is going to be adding on a few things to Lockstin's Pokémon reset theory, so I recommend you watch that as well. Now I know it's long, but even watching a little bit of it will help. This episode is also going to be longer than the last one, because we're not just talking about the Key of Solomon this time, we're going to tackle a few other aspects of the occult as well. So let's begin. The first thing to look at then is going to be something in the Pokémon universe which very obviously has connections to alchemy, as stated in Lockstin's video, the Sinjo Ruins. The Sinjo Ruins has got more to do with the occult than just alchemy though. When I first started watching Lockstin's series of theories about the alchemical connections that are present in Pokémon, I was kinda nervous. I was on edge the whole time thinking he was going to talk about what I wanted to make a video on at any second. Thankfully, he never went any further into Kabbalah than the Tree of Life. So if you're watching this, Lockstin, thanks for leaving me something to work with. Anyways, at first glance, the Sinjo Ruins doesn't look like it holds any secrets apart from the obvious connections to alchemy that the actual cutscene has. But that's because if you don't know about sacred geometry, you wouldn't catch the reference. Simply defined, sacred geometry involves sacred universal patterns used in the design of everything in our reality, most often seen in sacred architecture and sacred art. The basic belief is that geometry and mathematical ratios, harmonics and proportion are also found in music, light, cosmology, and in this case, the Pokémon universe. All I want to look at the moment though is a fairly simple part of sacred geometry, the platonic solids. Even though the name makes them sound weird and mysterious, they're actually just a part of normal mathematics. In fact, you might have even come across them before. Sacred geometry just assigns them more characteristics. Their name just defines what sets them apart from other 3D shapes. Number 1! Each face is the same regular polygon, except for the case of truncated polygons, which I'll address in a bit. Number 2! The same number of polygons meet at each vertex of the polygon. Number 3! There are 5 different platonic solids, which all correspond to each of the 5 elements that were originally said to make up everything. The Tetrahedron, which corresponds with fire, the icosahedron, which corresponds with water, the cube with earth, the octahedron with air, and the dodecahedron, which corresponds with the universe or ether. At the moment, I just want to examine the icosahedron and the tetrahedron. Now, if we look at the mystery stage inside the Sinjo Ruins, we can see that the icosahedron is present on the pad that represents Dialga. But Kaihatsu, I hear you say, that looks nothing like an icosahedron. And to that, I say boom! Truncated icosahedron. This one perfectly resembles the one that is seen in the game, despite the one in the game not being fully visible. The icosahedron represents water, which could represent how time is often associated with a flowing river, in that it only goes one way and runs its course. The dodecahedron looks similar, however does not have any hexagons present on it like the mystery stage does. Even though the adamant orb is not the shape in the games, if we look at the representation of the adamant orb in the anime, we can see that it is clearly the shape of a truncated icosahedron. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any sort of correlation between the platonic solids and Palkia, but if you find anything out yourself, you can let me know in the comments. Now for the tetrahedron. Whew, I have a lot of stuff to cover with this one. The tetrahedron symbolizes fire, but is also said to create the natural balance between the physical and spiritual. Each side sits flat, no matter how it is turned, making it the perfect symbol for balance and stability. This lines up perfectly with Giratina, as Giratina's primary job is to guard the distortion world, a place that balances out the regular world with itself, the spirit world, with Giratina as its guardian. Giratina also makes sure the two worlds remain separated but stable. But that's not all. The tetrahedron also appears in, you guessed it, the Key of Solomon. This time there's more than one pentacle to back up my claim. First, there is the fourth pentacle of Saturn, which has a tetrahedron right in the middle of it, along with another familiar-looking symbol. This pentacle also has an interesting description which relates directly to Giratina and the symbol that represents it on the mystery stage. This pentacle serveth principally for executing all the experiments and operations of ruin, destruction, and death. Sounds pretty similar to how Giratina is often described, a being of destruction and chaos. There's also the 7th pentacle of Saturn. The number 7 is present here just like Lockstin said, which symbolizes perfect alignment and completion. This pentacle also has an interesting reading. This pentacle is fit for exciting earthquakes, seeing that the power of each order of the angels herein invoked is sufficient to make the whole universe tremble. The last line reminds me of the climax of Pokémon Platinum, where the distortion world and the regular world begin to integrate, and the world begins to distort and change shape. This could also refer to how in the future we may see all of the legendary Pokémon come together to reset the Pokémon universe, or the 7 Ultra Beasts in Pokémon Sun and Moon, which could be likened to the 7 Angels of Revelation, which are said to cue apocalyptic events. The Tetrahedron is also important in another area of religion, specifically the Holy Trinity from Christianity, which joins the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit with God, using the tetrahedron triangle to show equality and balance, with God at the center. The tetrahedron in the middle of the pentacles also bears a resemblance to another symbol named the Dragon's Eye, which is a Germanic symbol used for protection but can also be associated with danger. But that's where the similarities end with that one. Still not convinced with this whole tetrahedron thing? Well, the designers at Game Freak planned it from the inception of Giratina's design. If you look at the sprite for the Greasiest Orb in Pokémon Platinum and later, you can clearly see the tetrahedron on the front of it. The official artwork for the Greasiest Orb also has this tetrahedron on the front, further solidifying the connection. Still don't believe me? You don't even have to turn on the game to see that the tetrahedron represents Giratina. You need look no further than the very front cover of Pokémon Platinum. In his series of videos, Lockstin also mentions that Zygarde will play a large role in Sun and Moon, and while I think that is true based on the evidence that we've been given from trailers and the like, I believe Giratina could also make a return, considering the Ultra Beasts are said to be from different dimensions, and that Giratina tries to keep different dimensions of our world in balance and separated. Now that we have that big mystery solved, I want to talk about the symbolism of the actual legendary Pokémon a little bit more, specifically Generation 2's Ho-Oh and Lugia, and Generation 4's Dialga and Palkia. When using an illustrated encyclopedia of traditional symbols by J.C. Cooper for research in my last video, I stumbled upon the symbolic correspondences of jewels to different religions and cultures. It was then that I realized that ever since Generation 2, most of the legendaries have had their versions' metals and jewels connect to their design. For example, the Generation 2 legendaries Ho-Oh and Lugia are supposed to correspond with gold and silver. Gold and silver also happen to correspond with the sun and the moon, and fire and water, just like Ho-Oh's typing and how Lugia is guardian of the seas. But the connections don't stop there. In Generation 4 we see that Dialga corresponds with Diamond and Palkia with Pearl, obviously. According to the book I mentioned earlier, diamonds correspond with the sun and pearls with the moon, so we can see the pattern repeat itself. Not to mention, putting the alchemical symbols for gold and silver together, we get the symbol for platinum. In the 5th generation, we have Zekrom and Reshiram, who are black and white respectively. White also has connotations of light and black with darkness, and could be seen to be linked to the sun and moon, albeit a bit of a stretch compared to the others. Game Freak was lucky with Generation 4 though, because if they decided to pick any other gemstones, then this whole theory of connectedness would have been void. Thanks for watching all of the video. While you're here, why not check out the science behind? It's another set of videos that focus more on the science and maths behind video games. You can also follow me on Twitter for information and updates about upcoming videos. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Lockstin for giving me a reason to make this little idea for a video I had into a fully fledged one. Without your Pokemon theory about Sun and Moon, I would never have found the motivation to make this into a video. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.